You can't enjoy anything without the shadow of guilt following immediately behind. Can't laugh without wondering if you're allowed to be this happy when there's so much you should be doing. Can't rest without calculating whether you've earned it. Can't indulge in small pleasures without hearing a voice in your head that sounds like every authority figure from your childhood, telling you that joy is frivolous, that play is wasteful, that anything that feels good must be wrong or at minimum undeserved. And so you've spent your entire adult life in this strange purgatory where pleasure exists, but you can't access it without punishment, where happiness is available but contaminated by the immediate conviction that you don't deserve it, that you're being selfish, that there's something more important you should be doing, someone more deserving you should be helping, some productive use of your time that would justify your existence better than this moment of simple, uncomplicated joy that you're experiencing, but can't fully feel because the guilt is louder than the pleasure. More familiar than the happiness, more automatic than the permission you never learned to give yourself. You buy something you want and immediately regret it, not because you can't afford it, but because wanting things feels greedy, feels excessive, feels like proof that you're selfish when you should be selfless, materialistic when you should be grateful for what you have, indulgent when you should be disciplined. You take a day off and spend it anxious, thinking about all the things you're not accomplishing, all the ways you're falling behind, all the people who are working while you're resting, like rest is a competition you're losing, like downtime is a moral failing, like your worth is measured entirely by your productivity, and any moment spent not producing is a moment spent proving you don't deserve the good things you have. You eat dessert and feel shame not about calories, but about the fact that you're prioritizing your pleasure over your discipline, choosing what feels good over what's right, indulging when you should be restraining, and you can't even finish the dessert without the guilt ruining it. Without the voice telling you that enjoying this makes you weak, makes you less than, makes you someone who can't control themselves, can't deny themselves, can't maintain the constant vigilance that you learned early, is the price of being acceptable. You don't dance anymore, don't sing in the car, don't do anything purely for the joy of it, because joy without purpose feels unjustifiable, feels wasteful, feels like something children do before they learn that life is serious, and pleasure is a reward you have to earn through suffering, through work, through being good enough that maybe, possibly, if you've done everything right, you get to feel happy for a few minutes before the guilt reminds you that happiness is temporary, and responsibilities are permanent, and you don't get to be light when the world is heavy. Don't get to play when there's work to be done. Don't get to feel good when there are people who feel bad and problems that need solving, and a version of yourself that you're supposed to be that doesn't waste time on frivolous things like enjoyment or leisure or the simple pleasure of being alive, without it needing to be productive or meaningful or justified by anything other than the fact that you wanted it. You've forgotten how to play, how to be spontaneous, how to do something just because it sounds fun, how to follow curiosity without it needing to lead somewhere useful, how to enjoy your own company without filling every moment with tasks or media or anything that distracts from the uncomfortable truth that you don't know how to just be, just exist, just take up space in the world without apologizing for it, or justifying it, or proving through constant achievement that you deserve the air you're breathing. You look at children playing and feel something break inside you. Some recognition of what you lost, what you never had, what got taken or trained or shamed out of you so early that you can't remember a time when pleasure didn't come with a price. When joy wasn't immediately followed by the question, but should I be feeling this? When happiness wasn't something you had to earn and defend and feel guilty about in equal measure. Here's where this started, where this pattern got written into your nervous system so deeply that now it runs automatically without you even noticing, until you're already drowning in guilt over something that should be simple, something that should be allowed. Something that shouldn't require justification or permission or a calculation of whether you've done enough to deserve a few minutes of feeling good. You had caregivers who themselves couldn't enjoy pleasure, who were raised in scarcity or religion or trauma, that taught them joy was dangerous, that taught them to be suspicious of anything that felt too good, that programmed them to believe that suffering was noble and pleasure was sinful, and the only acceptable way to live was in constant restraint, constant discipline. Constant denial of wants and needs and the basic human desire to feel good sometimes, and they passed that programming to you not necessarily intentionally but inevitably, because wounded people wound their children, because people who can't access joy can't teach joy. Because you learned by watching them that happiness was something to be guilty about, that pleasure required punishment, that any moment of lightness needed to be balanced by self-flagellation or increased productivity, or some other form of penance for the crime of feeling good, when you should be suffering through life like everyone else. And here's the brutal truth that explains why you are the way you are, why pleasure feels dangerous instead of delightful, why guilt is your automatic response to anything that makes you happy. You learned that joy was conditional, that it had to be earned, that you only got to feel good after you'd been good, after you'd accomplished enough. after you'd met standards that kept moving just out of reach, so you were always chasing permission you never quite received, always working toward a threshold of deserving that you never quite crossed. And eventually you internalized that, made it automatic, became your own harsh judge, your own guilt inducer, your own punisher for the crime of wanting to feel good, of taking up space, of believing that your pleasure matters as much as your productivity, that your happiness is as important as your usefulness, that you're allowed to exist in a state of joy without it needing to be justified by suffering or achievement or some other proof that you've earned the right to not feel guilty for once. For one moment, for one experience of pure, uncomplicated pleasure that isn't immediately contaminated by the conviction that you do not deserve it. You're not selfish for wanting pleasure, you're human. You're not weak for needing joy, you're alive. You're not wrong for choosing what feels good. Sometimes you're finally learning that life isn't supposed to be constant suffering, interrupted by brief moments of earned relief. It's supposed to include pleasure as a baseline, joy as a regular experience. Happiness as something you're allowed to feel without having to justify it to anyone, including yourself. And the guilt you feel, that automatic response that ruins every good thing, that's not your conscience, that's your conditioning. That's the voice of every person who taught you that pleasure was dangerous, that happiness was selfish, that wanting good things made you bad. And you've been believing that voice so long you forgot it wasn't yours, forgot that you get to decide what you deserve, forgot that the child inside you who just wanted to play and laugh and feel good without punishment, that child is still there, still waiting for permission, still hoping that someday the guilt will quiet enough to let the joy through. So here's what changes. Here's what you practice even though every fiber of your being is screaming that it's wrong. You choose one small pleasure per day, something tiny, something that costs nothing or nearly nothing, something that serves no purpose except that it makes you feel good, and you do it. And when the guilt comes, because it will come, it always comes, you notice it, you acknowledge it, you say, I see you, I know you think you're protecting me. I know you learned that pleasure is dangerous, but you're wrong, this is safe. I'm allowed to feel good, this doesn't make me selfish or weak or undeserving. And you keep doing the thing, keep feeling the pleasure. Keep choosing joy, even though guilt is screaming that you shouldn't. And you do this every day, one small act of rebellion against the programming that taught you happiness was conditional. One small reclaiming of the right to feel good that you were born with, but had trained out of you. One small permission slip to the child inside who's been waiting their entire life for someone to say, it's okay to be happy, you don't have to earn this. Joy is your birthright, not a reward. Start noticing when you automatically deny yourself pleasure. When you choose the harder path, not because it's necessary, but because it feels more deserving. When you punish yourself for wanting things by refusing to let yourself have them. And in those moments, pause. Ask yourself what the child inside you actually wants. What would bring genuine joy? What would feel light and free and good? And give yourself that. Not because you earned it, not because you deserve it by some external standard, but because wanting it is enough. Because you're alive, and alive means you're allowed to feel good sometimes. Allowed to choose pleasure over productivity. Allowed to prioritize your happiness over your guilt. And the more you do this, the more you practice choosing joy, the quieter the guilt becomes, the less power it has. The more you remember that life is supposed to include pleasure, that you were meant to enjoy being alive, that the child inside you who learned to suppress every want and need and desire for joy, that child can finally start to believe that maybe, possibly, hopefully, it's safe to want good things. It's safe to feel happy. It's safe to exist in pleasure without punishment, without guilt, without the constant voice telling you that joy is wrong and suffering is right, and the only acceptable way to be is in constant self-denial. Every pleasure gives you guilt because you learned that pleasure was dangerous, that joy had to be earned, that happiness made you selfish. But here's what you're learning now. What the child inside you is finally ready to hear. The guilt is a lie, a program, a pattern from people who couldn't access joy, teaching you that you couldn't either. And you get to rewrite it. You get to choose differently. You get to give that child what they never got, which is permission to play, to laugh, to enjoy, to feel good without apology, without justification, without guilt. And it starts now, right now, with one small choice to prioritize pleasure over productivity, to choose joy over guilt. To finally let yourself feel what you've been denying yourself permission to feel since you were small, and learn that happiness was something other people got, but you had to earn, and you're done earning, done justifying, done feeling guilty for the crime of being human, of wanting good things, of believing that maybe your joy matters as much as everyone else's, that maybe you're allowed to be happy without it needing to mean anything more than this. You're alive, and being alive is supposed to feel good sometimes, and today, right now, you're letting it.